you all for joining our webinar today. My name is Phil Sundahl. I'm a Senior Director of Marketing here at Batch, and today I am in the presence of greatness. We've got Steve Trang here with the Real Estate Disruptors Group. Steve is a sales guru, sales expert. He's been training on sales and has been a sales master for a long time. We'll have him introduce himself here in just a minute, but why is Steve on here today? It's because in real estate, no matter what aspect of real estate you're in, if you're an investor, you're a wholesaler, you're an agent, everything you do from generating leads to negotiating to persuading buyers and sellers, it's all sales at the end of the day. All right. So what are we talking about today? And first, actually, Steve, you want to just take a minute, tell us a little bit about yourself and what the Real Estate Disruptors Group is?
Yeah. So Steve Trang, obviously, most people know me from Real Estate Disruptors. I've been in real estate for 16 years. A lot of people don't realize that before I had a podcast, I was already in real estate. So I talk about every mistake you could possibly make in real estate. I have made it. The reason why I feel qualified to teach sales is not because I think I'm this genius in sales. It's the fact that I had the lowest possible foundation for sales. My background was actually in engineering. And if you can just count off the top of your head how many great engineers you know that are also great salespeople, there's not a lot of them, And so I was so bad at sales. I had to work so hard on sales to figure out what works. I can just explain it more in greater detail. And I can meet anyone where they're at in their sales journey or wherever they are in it because I've been in the entire journey. Again, the reason why I feel qualified to teach sales is because I sucked so bad at it. And I've invested so much effort to learn as much as possible. And then the other thing too is, one of the great benefits is I get to train, as actually was the caller before here. I'm the preferred sales trainer and collective genius. I get to train the best operators in the country on sales. And how that benefits me and how that benefits to our students that we work with is that I get to see exactly what's working today. I get to see what are the challenges right now and how do we overcome those challenges together.
That's awesome. And if you guys don't know too, for those of you who are batch service customers, you may know us for Batch Leads or Batch Dialer, which these are tools that help you generate your leads and talk with people, right? But that's only part of it. The soft skills, sales, negotiation is what we're here to learn today. And hopefully you guys can put the two of those together and find some success. So what Steve is going to talk about today is how to set yourself up for cold calling success. How do you get started? What are some good core tenets to follow? How do you build your confidence and learn to negotiate? How to persuade a seller to work with you? Because conversation is half the battle, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a relationship you have to form there. And then how to prevent your deals from getting poached, which is another important thing. You guys are
Absolutely
in a very competitive space where you're calling someone who, whatever situation they're in, they might be buying or selling. There's other people that are fighting for that business too. Mm-hmm. And at the end, we're going to give you some great, core tenets today and great tips and tricks for you to apply. But at the end, we've got an awesome offer for you guys too, that will give you just a plethora of resources to ensure your success. So without further ado, Steve, let's talk about setting yourself up for cold calling success.
So setting yourself up for cold calling success, I think there's a few things that I think are absolutely critical that we do on every single call. And I think, if you can make it past the first 15 seconds, and after that milestone, the next 30 seconds, and then getting to a minute, if you can get past a minute, you can have a real human interaction, you can have a real conversation. But that first 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and then a minute, that is the hardest part of the call. And once you get past that, you can actually, again, have a human interaction. So the first thing you want to do is you want to call as if they are expecting you. And the way it sounds like it's, hey, Phil. It's not, hi, is this Phil? Hi. Is Mr. Sundahl there? If I say, hi, is this Phil? What goes through your brain? So that's the first thing. Second thing, we introduce ourselves with a yes, no tonality. So I'm going to say, this is Steve. Hey, Phil. This is Steve. And so I want you to think about if you had a scheduled call with a person and they weren't prepared for it, they forgot about it. What does it sound like? Hey, Phil. Yeah, this is Steve. This is how you would have this conversation on an expected phone call that they completely forgot about. And then we deal with interruption. So the fact of the matter is, this was an unexpected call. And so what do we do typically with an unexpected call? Hey, Phil, is this a good time? And what's the typical answer to that? No, right? No, or hang up. So don't ask now a good time. So then somewhere along the way, we learn it's now a bad time, right? Hey, is now a bad time? They say, no, now we have an opportunity to continue this conversation. But the reality is, if they answer the phone, they have time. So all we're going to say is probably caught you at a bad time. And when we say probably caught you at a bad time, they generally want to correct us. No, I got a couple minutes. They have time. So there's figuratively, we're giving these homeowners whiplash, right? But what have we done? We survived the first 30 seconds of call. And so the reason for the call is we've been working with homeowners that are just exhausted fighting the banks about their payments, frustrated with their HOA and these constant fines, or overall are thinking about selling their property, but just can't bear the fact of working with a realtor. But I don't suppose any of those apply to you. And we're kind of taking it away here, right? But what are we doing? We're telling them the reason for the call. And because the way we say it, the reason for the call versus I'm calling you because, or are you looking for a cash offer? Right? That's going to hurt you. Like the reason for the call, they're going to lean into it.
Using a takeaway framework. What does this mean?
So that's kind of what I said earlier, right? Homeowners we worked with are just exhausted and just dealing with the banks as far as the payment situation, frustrated with HOA, or, want to sell the property, but don't want to work with a realtor. But I don't suppose any of those apply to you. Taking it away here. And we're hoping if we know they're a pre-foreclosure, if we know it's a code violation, those things are happening. But we're saying, probably doesn't apply to you. That's what we're looking for. Okay. Because we don't want to say, hey, I know that you're in foreclosure, Phil. And so that's the reason why I'm calling you. You're gonna like, that's creepy and offensive. Yeah. Right. So it's like, these are people we're working with, but I don't suppose any of those apply to you, knowing that it does. So that's the first part.
All right. Lastly, practice like an athlete.
So you look at athletes, they make tens of millions of dollars a year. Do they get paid for the performance on the court? They get paid for practice. They get paid for eating well in the off season. They get paid for studying game film. They get paid for working out. Everything they do outside what happens on the field or on the court. So if you want to get paid well, you've got to put in the work. You've got to practice, right?
Put in those reps, guys.
Yeah.
Be uncomfortable. Now we've got 3 rules to live by here. First one here, the person that needs the deal more loses.
Yeah. So when we're starting, we want every deal to work. And if you need this deal to work, then your ability to negotiate kind of goes out the window. So the difference between maybe someone that's doing a lot of deals versus someone that's not doing as many deals, like someone like trying to do their first couple deals or trying to do 3 deals a month or more, is how much they need to deal. They're sabotaging themselves unknowingly by wanting the deal. So I want you to consider the fact that every distressed homeowner needs to sell that house. We don't need to buy that house. Now, we need to buy houses. We need to be able to wholesale and flip, or we're out of business. So we need to do transactions, but we don't need to do this transaction. It's an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. If you go into the appointment feeling like you need to make this deal, you will lose negotiation.
And number 2, rules to live by when negotiating, understanding why we fear rejection.
I think part of cold calling is you got to understand why it's so hard. If you understand why it's so hard, then it might be easier to deal with those challenges. So I totally understand the heart palpitations. So when you're afraid to pick up the phone, your body is telling you, don't do anything that's going to cause you to get rejection, because that will lead to death. But the reality is no one's dying from cold calling, at least not because of the cold calling. If they're dying while they're cold calling, they had comorbidities, right? Yeah. There are other extenuating circumstances going on, but no one's dying because they're cold calling. And so you understand why you're afraid to pick up the phone. It should make it easier to pick up the phone. Other thing too, is it doesn't take a long time to hit the start dialer button. Like the cool thing about batch services is you get a dialer, and within the dialer, you hit start dialer and then it just goes. So back in my day, we didn't have batch dialer. I would have to use my cell phone and dial in to 10 digits for every single call. I got all this rejection, all this fear. So you can only make so many dials before you're kind of burnt out. But with a dialer, you only need to be brave when you hit the start button. You only need to be brave for less than a minute a day to drastically change your financial outcome.
Number 3, it's not just about what you say, but why you say it.
So I get asked to join different podcasts, do these different shows. It's like, Steve, give me the book of magic answers. Like, how do I overcome this specific objection? And the problem with just here's what to say in this situation is now you've got to have this library in your head. Right? Like, here are the 100 objections, and here's what you say for those 100 specific objections. And if that is the burden you're putting yourself, when they give you that objection, you're going to look back into your library inside your head, and you're going to think about it for a few seconds and then come up with the answer. What I would encourage you is not to focus so much on what to say, but understand the framework of sales. And so in this instance, this is a framework, right? This isn't a tool or a tactic. This is hey, you told me you want more money. You've also told me it's important to be closer to your mom. It's really important to you. Help me understand which one is more important. This is a framework, right? We mirrored, we isolated, we went back to what he told us earlier, and then we're putting the ball back in his court. So it's not about what are the magic words. It's about how do we take everything you told us and deliver it back to you for you to figure out what's important.
All right. Let's dive into persuading a seller to work with you. First thing here, most people actually shouldn't work with you.
So if you look at historically, 4% of people will sell their property off the MLS. 96% of the population, when they need to sell their house, the right decision is to go with a realtor. We don't want to hear that, but the reality is 96% of them are going to go with a realtor. So that means all of us wholesalers, all of us flippers are going against Opendoor, OfferPad, hedge funds against each other. We're all fighting for the same 4%. And so when you're talking to a prospect, if they figure out that going to the realtor is the best fit for them, so be it. If they figure out that, hey, they need to sell that house right now. At that point, it is up to us to convince them to work with me. That's when the sales skills come into place. We've identified you must sell. Now, when we figure out you must sell, it's up to me to help you realize working with me is the best option for you.
All right, next, build trust, not rapport.
Yeah, we see so many people talking about how important it is to build rapport, right? And I think building rapport is one of the biggest fallacies in our industry. Building rapport is not that important, not when we're buying houses. Building rapport is great if I'm trying to convince you to buy a really nice watch, if I'm trying to get you to buy this dream vacation, right? Timeshare, whatever. Rapport is important, right? We got to be friends. Because if I'm going to sell you something that you want to buy, I've got to build rapport. But in this scenario where I'm trying to convince you to sell your house to me versus all the other options, I've got to get you to trust. And so if you were to, God forbid, you go to a doctor, it's like, hey, I'm dealing with some numbness in my foot. And you go in, it's like, well, hey, you've got type 2 diabetes or you got diabetes and like, we're going to have to amputate. Are you going to say like, well, I don't really like you so much as a doctor. Your rapport has been crap. I'm not going to do the operation. Or you're going to say, okay, this guy's the doctor. He says we need an amputation. But you don't base your decision on how much you like the doctor. You base your decision on how credible this doctor is. So we've got to build trust, not rapport.
Play hard to get.
So I learned from a mentor a long time ago, pursued prospects run away. If you're chasing the prospect and you need this deal, they'd be like, I don't know what's going on here, but this just doesn't feel right. But if you don't need the deal, hey, Phil, we're not for everybody. If our offer doesn't make sense, hey, no big deal. We'll part ways, right? So you got to have the mindset where they've got to chase you. You're not chasing them.
Next tip here. Seek to understand exactly what's going on in the world.
So this goes back to, the poker analogy, right? If I like to look at the homeowner, they're playing poker with a face up. Look another way, Battleship, right? I think a lot of us played Battleship when we were kids. And so if you could just imagine you're playing Battleship and by the questions you ask, you've more or less been able to put a mirror on the other side where you see exactly where the ships are. And so when you go make your offer, it's like, hey, Phil, it sounds to me like, you're really frustrated that you're living so far from your mom. You can't help her when she needs you the most. Your siblings are just like all over you that you got to get this done. And, you're losing sleep because, the only thing stopping you from doing this is this house. Like, yeah, that is what's going on. That's the equivalent of us hitting only the ships with our pegs on the battleship, right? None of our pegs are going into the water. Every single peg is hitting the battleship. So that is the end goal. If I understand exactly what's going on in your world, right? And this goes back to trust, that rapport. You've given me everything I need to know to work with. And then I got to figure out, can I make this work for you or not?
Last one. Don't be too professional.
So just imagine you show up to someone's house. You've got your laptop bag. You got your comps. You got your contract ready. What's the homeowner seeing here? It's like, this guy came here to do business and their guard is raised. So for me, I like to show up empty-handed. Now I got contracts in the car. I got my pen in the car. Like, we're ready to do business. But it's in the car, right? So they're going to be more forthcoming to answer our questions. The other thing too is we see some of these guys like, well, let me tell you how our business works. When we buy your house, we're going to put everything through escrow. We're going to put the money in. We're going to do inspections. We're going to have a bunch of people walking through. And we do all this educating thing because we want to show like, man, like how good we are at our business. Again, no one gives a crap about us, right? The more we try to impress the prospect, the more they're like, all right, I got to raise my guard because this professional is about to close me. So what we want to do is move away from trying to show how professional we are and move towards just asking questions, struggling on purpose.
Last thing we're going to talk about is preventing your deals from getting poached, which I think a lot of people on this call have experienced this in one way or another.
Oh, yeah. Yep, for sure.
So number one, preventing remorse.
So I think one of the things that happens is you lock up a deal. You lock up a great contract, right? Feels pretty good. Man, we got the seller, sign a contract. We got a good price. I'm going to make like 40K on this. Like, you're just super stoked and you can't wait to get out of the house and start pushing it, whatever, right? I get it because that was me as well. What you got to do before you leave is you got to prevent the remorse. So something we might say is, hey, Phil, before I go, what does this contract mean to you? And you're like, well, it's just a contract that says that you're going to buy my house for X amount. Here's what it means to me. It means finally being able to put this whole family dynamic with your mom that's, couple of states away, deal with this, able to not have to worry about this house anymore, and you can just take care of your family. If you have any hesitation whatsoever on, whether this contract makes sense for you to move forward with, any doubts with me whatsoever, can you just do me a favor and just tear up this contract right now? Well, sometime in the next few days, you might ask yourself, like, why did I sign this agreement with this other guy? Like, what are you going to say then? What are you going to tell yourself then? I'm hoping that he'll come up with like, well, here's why I'm doing this, right? Just to remind him later on, because he's going to have hesitation in a couple of days. We want him to be prepared for the hesitation now. Right? And we're just telling him, you're going to have doubts. What are you going to do when you have those doubts? In addition, who's going to be upset that you didn't run any of this by them? Like, well, my wife's sister who's a realtor. Okay, well, what are you going to tell them? Well, I'm going to tell them, like, it's my house and like I'm going to do this to take care of my mother, right? And all I'm looking for here is for you to give me something that you can say to someone else, right? Because if I don't coach you on this, and now it's like, why did you sell the house to investor versus listing with me? You're gonna be like, I don't know, maybe I should have. You're gonna feel guilty, and then you're gonna try to cancel with me. So I'm just giving you a rough draft of the script to say something, anything to say to anybody else, so that you're more empowered when that time comes, versus sending you out unprepared. And over the next 14 days, 30 days, you're gonna have people calling you, texting you, knocking on your door, promising they can pay more than what we paid. What are you gonna tell them? And if you say like, well, I should look at all my options. Well, Phil, we got a problem here. What's the problem? Well, I'm going to go back to my office. I'm going to tell them, hey, guys, we're going to help Phil here. Make sure all the paperwork is done properly so that we can close on the day he needs to close. Also, let's make sure we set aside some funds so that when we do close, the money is available for him so that it doesn't get spent anywhere else. Now, if you're telling me you're not fully committed to working with us, how can I possibly go back to my team and ask them to do all that work? And you're going to say like, oh, I had no idea how much work was involved. Okay, well, no, if they get high, if anyone promises higher offer, I'm going to tell them I'm already working with Steve, right? So that's all we're doing here in preventing remorse.
The sales disruptors, the real estate disruptors group is amazing. And you guys see, you got a little taste of Steve today, but you guys are familiar with a lot of resources out there that cost thousands of dollars, right? These master classes, these training programs, getting direct access to people like Steve to talk through these scenarios and really get that like personalized coaching. Steve has partnered with us to give you guys access to all this for $97 a month. So please bring out your phone, scan that. We'll also link it in the chat if you guys want access to this, but this is incredible value. There's not a lot of people that do it at the level that Steve does here. So hopefully you guys understand how good of an investment this is in yourself. Let's go to Q&A. We've got our Sunday is a business day. We'll do some rapid fire here.
Yeah, I think Sunday is absolutely a business day. You get people that are upset with you, but great news is you get way fewer people calling on Sundays. So because you have way fewer people calling on Sundays, you have a better chance of locking up a deal. So yes, absolutely, Sunday is a business day.
Thank you for that question. Where do you personally pull your data from, Steve?
So we pull data from a lot of different places through the years. A lot of Batch, a lot of PropStream, a lot of Authentic, DataFlick. We've pulled data from everywhere.
Just make sure that wherever you're getting your data, obviously we'd love if you get it from Batch, but be wary of cheap data. And I will say that, you mentioned buying an entire city of skip trace data. A lot of people do that and will resell that same file for years.
Oh yeah. But I would say absolutely you got to skip trace it with Batch no matter what, because we know for sure Batch is the best at skip tracing.
How often should data be refreshed? I have like 200,000 records skip traced 3 years ago. Should it be re-skip traced? Great question, Walter.
I mean, I would say 3 years. It should definitely be re-skipped. I don't know if the answer is every year, but I would say if it's been more than a year, it should be re-skipped. But you should only skip trace the ones that you want to get a hold of, right? Don't just refresh.
Chris says, where do I get updated code violation lists, eviction lists, etc.?
So I can't speak for eviction lists in other parts of the country. What we did here in Phoenix is we actually started, these are kind of the crazy things that we do, entrepreneur. We started a nonprofit agency so that we can get onto other county clerk data that isn't available to the general public. So we get every civil case, we get every criminal case, we get every, so those include landlord evictions. We get everyone that has been arrested and is going to trial, right? So that's all through starting a nonprofit agency and then dealing with the county clerk. I don't know how to do it in other states. I just know how we did in Arizona. Code violation in Phoenix, you just bring your $12.50 and you go to the, I want to say planning and development, but there's a very specific place in Phoenix that everyone goes for $12.50, pulls their data. It's very specific. It is $12.50. If you show up with $13, they won't take it. So everyone goes to Starbucks downstairs, gets their change. So they have $12.50 exactly. So that's in Phoenix. I can't speak for other markets.
Julian, we'll do a couple more questions here. Julian, thank you for your question. Steve, to summarize some of the slides, what is something you can give us today as an action in cold calling?
I would say first and foremost, you got to be crystal clear as to why you're doing what you're doing. You have to know why, right? Is it to change your family? Like we were saying earlier, with those flippers, are you trying to quit your job? Are you trying to build a rental portfolio? Are you trying to retire your parents? Are you trying to retire your spouse? Are you trying to put your kids into private schools? Whatever it is, you got to figure out what it is that's important to you. And once you understand why you're doing what you're doing, put that as a reminder for you every single day. Because here's the thing about cold calling. It usually sucks. You got a bunch of angry people, right? Everyone is pissed off. So you're talking to a bunch of angry people to eventually find the right people that want to work with us. So there's a lot of sifting and sorting, and there's a lot of elements of cold calling sucks. I don't deny this. And so that's the reality of it. You got to know why. You got to embrace why you're doing what you're doing. So I would say the action here is to be crystal clear as to your purpose.
All right. Well, hey guys, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you really enjoyed this. And while I'm cutting you off here from Steve right now, join that community and get access to him, right? Like you said, the 3 calls a week, access to his team, the master courses, I mean, everything. So we hope to see you there in that community, guys. And thank you so much.